Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today, he is an acclaimed director from Colombia. His current film is called OverExposed, Mr. Juan Castilla. Welcome, Juan.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, man. I know you didn't come all the way from Colombia.
Yeah.
You came from uptown Manhattan.
Yeah, Hampton Heights.
But we appreciate people making the schlep to the studio anyway. So thanks for being here, man. And we want to talk about OverExposed and some more about your body of work. But first, I want to talk to you about you and kind of get a sense of your history. So, how did you come to filmmaking? What is your origin story, so to speak?
Well, from high school in Bogota, Colombia, I moved to Los Angeles. I went to school in LA City College. It was a school that it was with its emphasis in practical. So that's where we learned how to shoot films in Super 8, in 16, and at the same time, I was studying psychology. I was combining both, and from there I started working in productions. But at the same time, I was also working for the psychology department, doing all their videos, and doing also a lot of work for the mental clinic at the university.
Those two things go together.
The reason I decided,
I think every filmmaker is a therapist in a way.
Yeah, I know. That was my my thinking about how by studying psychology I could build more fully dimensional characters, and how I could, learn about behavior, human behavior, and in that way work better with actors.
I want to talk to you some more about that, but first, let's talk about OverExposed.
Yeah.
So, this is, I would describe it as an experimental film, an art film, so to speak. We don't get a lot of this sort of thing on the show, which is why it's good to talk to you, and I want to talk to you kind of about why that type of filmmaking is important.
Right.
But what would you say the film is about, and kind of how did it come about in a way? Like, how did it, what was the kind of idea that sparked everything?
OverExposed is about Joan. She's a rape victim, and she undergoes overexposure therapy under the tutelage of his best friend, that he's a psychiatrist. But she has very strong religious beliefs, so she has to let go the mystical to undergo the scientific method. So there goes a battle in between the science and the mystical, the esoterical. The way this film came about was working at the mental hospital at the university. I learned about cases that people were using overexposure therapy. Especially.
What is that? How would you describe that?
So people with post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), they will have a trauma and they wouldn't know how to deal with it. So what overexposure does is that it reinforces and makes you relieve the trauma until you become habituated with it. They make you relive it again and again until you don't feel anything. A good example is people with agoraphobia. This is a more basic one, where they make people when they have fear of elevators. So they make them go first just close to the elevator, then one floor, and then
they gradually they get them more and more used to it.
So the same they do with the trauma. They make you go back to the trauma and just go for every detail, about it. And that's where I thought how the film, with film, you could really go and explore this therapy, this kind of, because we can go vividly into it, and go every detail. So that's what the film does. We undergo, along with Joan, with the character, this therapy. We go into these sessions where we reconstruct the film. We deconstruct it, we put it apart, and then we put it all together, until it all makes sense.
So you're kind of using the elements of film to illustrate this type of therapy,
right?
Which is interesting because I'd never seen that before. And there are also, like you mentioned, the character's religious. There's a lot of religious symbolism and things like that in there. You made this film in back home, right? You made this in Colombia?
Yeah, I shot it in Colombia. So, but I was living in New York. So what I will do is I will go shoot for 5 months, sometimes for 5 weeks, 3 weeks. Then I'll come back, prepare the next segment, and go back. So this started all the way in 2013 when I wrote it. I did rehearsals with the actors here in New York, the main actors. But I will also have actors in Colombia, so we will go and do rehearsals over there and come back.
What were some of the challenges of working? Because it's basically set like, it looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. Like it looks like it's in the middle of a jungle or something.
Yeah.
So what were kind of some of the challenges that you had to overcome in making that? And you said that you would go and shoot for weeks at a time, but how long in total did it take you to make the movie?
Yeah, that was, one of the toughest parts was being consistent with the story, with production, over 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the shooting really, and especially the last year, that's when you need to keep your composure and keep working hard at it. So the hardest, what I wanted, the same as I wanted to work with only 2 characters to really go deep into them. Instead of just having many characters and just deviating from them. So I put them in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. And I also did that with the casting crew. I said, I don't want them to be thinking about other projects. Like we in New York, actors, they have like 5 auditions a day, or filmmakers, or the DP has 2 movies they're shooting. Here, they were completely focused on my film, And the beautiful thing about this is that everybody was connected to the film. Everybody was, we were all in sync with the film. But the challenges was there were sometimes all of us being enclosed in this small cabin, where we shot the film. We were also there. So,
how many people were we talking about in the crew?
Normally, it was about from 10 to 18 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's still a significant amount of people to cram into a small space and keep together for weeks at a time while you're shooting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The actors in this film, they go through a lot.
Right.
And I don't want to spoil anything because the movie surprises you continually. I managed to watch the whole thing, and it's there's parts where you're going. I was just, as a director, I was just going, yeah, nobody would ever do that I know. Why? How did he get these people to do this? So what was the kind of method and work with the actor? Because you have scenes of, you mentioned she's a rape victim. You show some of that in the film, which I think is traumatic in and of itself.
Right.
You have all these different scenes. People are naked. People are fighting.
Right.
There's certain violence to it and stuff.
Yeah.
How do you approach that sort of thing when you have those difficult moments?
Okay.
And how do you know when an actor is kind of game to do that?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
I think it's definitely preparing it and being as clear as possible with the actors, what's going to happen. And, the same as with our exposure therapy, you take the actor by every little detail, letting them know what's exactly going to happen, So being clear about that, that's the most key.
Because you have scenes where there's a bit of violence, it's sexual, and all that stuff. Did you choreograph all that stuff? Did you have somebody come in and choreograph that stuff?
So the first, the main attack that happens with the main actor, with Gwen, we had somebody, it was actually one of her acting coaches from Lee Strasberg, and we went to the school and we did all the rehearsals, like what I did, because I wanted to be in the characters and actors' shoes as much as possible. He will, this guy, he was the acting coach. He does also all the stunts. He will be attacking me, so I will be undergoing the attack to really see how it feels and all that stuff, so I could.
So you kind of did everything first.
Everything, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good way to gain trust, and say, hey, I'm not just going to ask you to do this stuff. I'm going to do it myself.
Right. I will always be willing to jump into anything that will make them more comfortable,
And was it a long audition process? Did you know these people beforehand, or?
Gwen Alberts, I knew her before. So with her, that's where the story came about. That's where
she carries the most in the film. She's the lead, and she's really the subject.
Right.
And I think she's in every scene, just about.
In every scene. Yeah.
So So to get her first is key. But you knew her. You had a relationship.
Yeah, we knew each other, and we wanted to work together in a film. So we wanted to work in a film about Joan of Arc, and we started to explore the life of Joan of Arc when she was burned at the stake, when she was tortured. We started to investigate how she probably was raped, and that made her change her perception about her being almost like an angel from God, so we moved that into the film, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of religious symbolism and things like that. I don't think it's overdone, but it's certainly there, and you go, okay, I got it. She's, Catholic or whatever. The thing that's curious about this type of filmmaking is because you do really, I think you kind of push some boundaries with films like this, and you don't see a lot of these movies.
Right.
They're shocking in a way, and I would guess that they're meant to be that way.
Yeah.
You're making a statement with these films.
Right. Yeah.
Do you feel like there was anything that you were kind of particularly trying to say with this film? And what is the here's the next question would be what is the place for a movie like this? Where does it fit in terms of the the whole scope of entertainment and I always ask people who's this movie for kind of thing. So what did you want to say and who do you think? Who does it speak to? Who's the audience for?
Well, there's definitely an audience, not so much in the American market, but European and Latin American markets is developing underground filmmaking and film critics. But I think also, everybody should watch all types of films. You watch something from Hollywood, action, comedy, but there's a moment for also watching a film that takes you underground, that really takes you into the depths of evil or goodness, and these kind of films, for me, not as a filmmaker but as an audience, they feed me, about seeing different angles of life, So
have you screened the film anywhere yet?
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay.
This is,
are you getting feedback from friends and family and stuff like that?
They're all mixed. Some they like it, some they're not so much. They are a little bit afraid of the subjects. But most people that they like it, they really like it because they feel that the film goes deep into what it should go do.
I think we were talking a little bit before we started rolling, and I feel like with any film like this, especially in the experimental genre, or people call them art films, and sometimes you see these films in different places. You see them at MoMA, or you see them in different museums and such. And I think there's definitely a place for them. Definitely there's a place on the film festival circuit for them, because they do have categories for experimental films for people who want to see that. So, and I think it's as someone who does not make experimental films, or like a lot of our audience that probably don't make this type of movie, I think it would be, and tell me if you agree, I think it would be important to see this sort of thing, because it will help you stretch your sort of more conventional filmmaking.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll see a technique that you didn't know before, or you'll find a way to reach an audience quicker, or you'll have a visual that you go, oh wow, that's a great way to show that type of thing. Yeah. Were there particular movies that sort of influenced you in this regard? How did you? Yeah. Because it's there's a lot of people they want to make blockbusters, they want to make dramas and comedies and things like that. But for the experimental filmmakers, it's sort of a thing that people go through in film school, and then they kind of get over that phase and they say, you know what, I want to make money, so I'm going to make something more conventional. But what was it for you that said, I'm meant to make this kind of movie?
Right. I think no matter what are your goals as a filmmaker, every filmmaker should first do the films that they really like, that they really feel that they have, and it's almost like just whatever you're keeping, you gotta take it out and put it out there, and that's where you develop your sense of a filmmaker, Then later you can go into other genres, but first I think those films they have to be done. And if it's something that you really like, it's something that you can pursue, and keep going on experimental films. And many of the films that I like, they have this sense of they are entertaining, but they are also experimental, So,
can you give me some examples of what that would be?
Films like Irreversible. It's a film that I like a lot. And even some more famous ones you could think of. And for this film, there were influence like Memento or Inception, The Following, also for Christopher Nolan, The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick, and there's more shorts and more experimental films, but these are like the most known ones.
Yeah, something like a Memento or like Inception or Following. Following is actually a really good film for those of you out there who haven't seen Following. It's Christopher Nolan's first film.
Right.
It took him years to make, I think. But it's a great little movie, and it's what you can do with a 16 millimeter black and white camera and window light. He uses a lot of natural light in that film. There's a lot of scenes on like rooftops and stuff, and it is pretty experimental. It does have it does have sort of an edge to it in that way. And then from there, you went to Memento, which is an experimental way of storytelling where you're not telling your linear story. You're jumping around in time, and it's the only reason that movie works. Yeah, because I think if you told that movie linearly, it would be boring, short
and boring. Yeah,
right.
But to add into the question about why do we do experimental films, is you can see in Christopher Nolan a good example of how now in newer films that they are now blockbusters, he uses techniques that he used when he was doing experimental films. Now he puts characters close to windows. He uses a lot of inserts, things like he had to do or he did because he liked when he was doing experimental films. Now people think but the reason is because of what brought him there. So
well, everybody, first of all, whether where your goal is to make an experimental movie or not, I think every filmmaker has to experiment to a certain to a certain degree. To figure out who you are, like find your identity as a creator, and let's face it, this whole process is trial and error, man. Like you're either gonna you put it out there, it works, or it doesn't, and you try this, and you do it whether it's on the set or in the cutting room. I mean, how many times do you put a scene together and you go, oh, that doesn't work, and you try it again, and sometimes you have to really get creative with something. You look at a filmmaker like Steven Soderbergh. Look at a film like Out of Sight with Clooney and
Jennifer Lopez.
That where there's this great sequence I saw it talked about in a movie about editing where they had this sort of conventional scene where they have a drink, and then there's the love scene that happens right afterwards.
Such an amazing
scene. But they overlay the dialogue
Yeah.
and intercut the scenes, and it's so much more interesting,
so much more powerful
than just going from scene A to scene B kind of thing. But you don't get that way unless you try things out and experiment and see what is possible, And that's what I liked about your film, is that there was stuff in there I was like, oh, I haven't kind of seen that in a while, or I haven't seen that portrayed that way. And you use certain techniques like montage a lot.
Right.
It's almost like like in some of the more graphic scenes, you do have some master shots, but there's a lot of pieces. It's almost like a cubist kind of way to look at it, seeing things from different perspectives, and having you sort of put the whole event together in your head, sort of thing, which I appreciated. And do you also switch from black and white to color at some point?
There's few moments where, but not not all the past scenes. I switched to black and white, But the let's call it the main scene, the attack scene. It was a scene that, as the therapy, as the exposure therapy, we knew that we had to reconstruct and see it from all eyes, So that scene, actually, we shot it from any angle you can think of, any movement you can think of, everything, from every point of view. It was shot, and that, because that scene it's going to be used a lot, and at the end it's going to be like the culminating moment. So. Editing that was very difficult,
I was just going to ask you about that, because you're putting together this montage type scene, and you have all these different angles, and you have to figure out what goes with what. It's like it's kind of like putting a puzzle together in a way, and I would imagine there was a lot of trial and error where you said you put it together, you went, no, not
No.
the, you know,
Oh.
like let's try it again.
Months, years, you know. But one thing, I would recommend for filmmakers is many times directors, they have assistant editors or editors, and they give the footage to them, and sometimes they don't really watch everything. But what I recommend, even if you have an assistant editor or somebody that's logging for you, I will actually recommend, I do it, to log everything yourself, to almost write, you know, every clip, exactly what you see, your thoughts, you know, because that is going to help you, you know. If you really write everything in the clip, then you're gonna later think about, oh, here I can use this and that, you know. Everything makes more sense when you write it, you know.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of being organized in editing because I'm an editor myself, and when I put things together, I'm so anal about making sure that I have everything, like all the metadata is in there, and I have everything keyworded, because it's always that. I mean, how many times you sat down at the computer, and like, where's that shot?
I can't.
I you know, like I don't know. I know I shot that, but where is it? Now I got to go through all the clips and find it. And but yeah, just having that familiarity, and then you can kind of like dream about it a little bit,
right?
And hopefully it kind of culminates together, and then you try it out, and then it works or it doesn't work, and then you try it more. Do you have any other advice for filmmakers that want to make this type of film, or want to try kind of new things?
Right. Especially because we were shooting in a different country, and the crew was in Colombia. It was an all Colombian crew, and the rest of the cast, except for the two main, were also in Colombia. So the way I will communicate with them, the most key is communication, and how. What I did is I create a master screenplay where from day one I wrote it with every little detail, and I will put all the departments. I will underline with a color for every department, but I will just add everything, and I will have everybody from the cast and crew be able to access this document. And this will keep us all communicated, all with checklist, and something that is accessible, not something that only the DP is going to be able to see, but anybody can access from any computer, So in that way, we knew that we're all in the same page, I think keeping something like that from day one until I have it until now, until post-production, makes the film cohesive, and not... lacking communication or
because a lot of times these things get broken down. And you do have to break down the script in order to figure out how you're going to make it. But Francis Ford Coppola actually did that. I saw behind the scenes of one of his films where he put this thing together called The Score, where he had everything, and he actually had an actor narrate it and do the different parts and stuff. So they had like an audio recording of it, and then as they shot, they would kind of gradually drop it in there, and he would also do like a lookbook for it, like an inspiration book, different paintings he wanted to emulate and things like that. Which I think when you're trying to make a vision for a movie, especially if it's not something conventional, that inspiration and that guide to say, hey, this is what the movie's going to look like, this is what the movie's going to feel like. It also helps you sell it to people who might want to work on it. Or
you can use it for even until now for advertising. Having like paintings. Also, when I did all the rehearsals with the main two actors, I was also taking photos of the shots that I want. So I was already framing the whole scene. So I will give that to the DP, and then when we were gonna shoot, then we had it already, because we also had to shoot a lot every day. You had like you didn't storyboard with pencil and paper, but you had shots, sort of like a photo storyboard that you could use. That's great. I use that all the time myself, and especially if you have, especially if you're working with, even if you just have your cell phone or something, you can say, hey, this is kind of what, because when you approach things with a DP. Like you have an idea for what is a close-up, and they have an idea for what is a close-up, and you have to kind of communicate. No, this is my close-up. This is when I say close-up. This is what I want. This is what a medium close-up is. This is what the wide shot is, and you get like a sense of that visual language between the two of you, so that you can,
by the time you get to shoot, when you're through pre-production, it's just like
It's all
shorthand.
set. Yeah.
You don't have to debate anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think being as specific as possible in this master script, with every little detail for everybody, it really helps. Yeah.
And we're going to wrap up in a second, but as far as the film is now in terms of distribution, you guys are going to do the festival circuit with it?
Yeah.
And have you've been applying, but you haven't shown anywhere as of yet?
Not as yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
so hopefully by the time this thing runs, you'll have some updates for us. But for people who want to know more and find the film, like watch the trailer or something like that, where can they find you on the web?
So they can go to cinemaunion-.com or cinema-union.com, and then in Instagram it's OverExposed, but it's O.B. So basically a dot in between all of them.
Okay.
So maybe that's going to be a bit complicated. But in cinema-union.com, they can find everything. Yeah.
Cinema-union.com.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up, but thanks so much for coming. And
Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more episodes of this show, you can always find them on our website, norestoftheweekendpodcast.com. You can also subscribe on all the major podcast channels if you prefer to listen. And now we're on Patreon, so you can find us on patreon.com/NoRestForTheWeekend. Once again, want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to Juan Castilla. Thanks so much for dropping by. And for Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.